And welcome, Tom Lord Alge, to Waves Open Sessions Fix My Mix. What's going on?
Welcome to Spank Studios here in Miami Beach. We're doing the quarantine here. I'm quarantining with my SSL.
I'm curious, where did the word Spank Studios come from? And did you wake up one morning and just think that's a great name, or is there a story behind it?
Nah, the story behind it is it's
a great name.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Chris and we refer to our abuse of compression, I guess one might say. Well, back in the 80s and early 90s, people actually thought that we overcompressed things.
Crazy.
So we used to call that type of corporal punishment to audio spanking. So hence the name kind of stuck with Spank Studios. But yeah, and now when I hear mixes, I'm like, oh, we weren't using nearly enough compression.
So
we have been in the past. People have accused us of over compressing. And I remember mixing an album where I actually used to have to put tissue paper over the hardware, over the meters, because the producer would come in and he'd just look at it and go, "That's too much compression." So I did that just so that he would use his ears and not his eyes.
Well, that's the main thing, isn't it? It's like it's all about your ears. So this is
not
a Fix Your Mix session. It's not the gear, it's your ears. So this is about we're using a band called the infamous Her. Now, for those of you in viewer land, just so you know what happened, we actually asked for submissions, and we went through hundreds and hundreds of submissions, and this is the one that Tom picked. So, Tom, tell us a bit about the song and why you picked this one out of the submissions, if you wouldn't mind.
The infamous Her, Rabbit Hole. I picked the song because I liked the energy. I picked the song because I felt that their mix was good, but I felt that it could be improved upon. There was nothing I did not like about what they did. I just felt that the song deserved to be just a little bit more special.
Yeah, I really like this. I really like the song.
Me too. It's a
great song.
It's got good attitude. It's a rock song. Look, let's start with the fact that drum, bass, guitar, go.
Yeah,
I like that. So there's a simplicity to that, and also it gave me a great opportunity to try and make the song expand. It literally, the song is drums, bass, two guitars. It's basically one guitar for 90% or 80% of the song. And in the chorus, a second guitar comes in, one or two synthesizer parts, and a vocal. So it's not, 150 tracks of overdubs, so it wasn't really sifting through that kind of stuff. So having that type of simplicity really makes each instrument that much more important, because it's obviously, when it's drums, bass, and one guitar playing for most of the song, they need to sound awesome. Yeah, so they did a great job. Whoever did their mix did a great job on it. But when I heard it, the song kind of spoke to me. Again, I liked the attitude. I liked what they were doing. And I just thought I can improve upon this.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, so let's have a listen to the mix that you were sent, and then let's pull things apart and work out and help people learn some things.
So this is Rabbit Hole by the infamous Her, and this is the mix that was sent to me. that takes us up through that first chorus of their mix. And as you can see, while I was listening to it, I was just digging it. I mean, even their mix, like I listened to it, I'm like, you know, it's good. It's got good energy. Now, what am I hearing in that mix? So when I listened to the song, obviously the first thing I thought of, you know, do I like the song? Yes. So it met that criteria.
Okay, so just quickly before we go on, so the one that we just listened to was Brown or Orange, and that was the original mix. We're now listening to Blue, and this is your mix. The A is yours, right?
Correct. So we played the B, which is the mix that they sent to me, and now we're going to play my mix.
Okay.
Here we go. Or first day with the new hands. Here we go. Try again. So yeah, so there's the same part of the song, but my mix. What are the differences? So for my ear, I felt their mix was just a touch boxy in the low mid range. It was getting just a little bit, for my taste, it was just a little bit woolly in that area. So I kind of cleared it out. The other thing for me was I didn't feel that it expanded enough, especially when it gets into that B section and the chorus. I really wanted to hear an expansion, especially in the guitars. I wanted to hear a big left right, and that's basically what I did.
Yeah, I kind of heard that the guitars spread out a lot more in that version. So it's can we you want to take us behind the scenes and show us what you did so we can dig around a bit?
Sure. Yeah. Let's dig in the dirt. Let's dig in the dirt. So as any of my mixes or any mix pretty much, let's go right to the beginning. It all starts with the drum set. Okay. It all starts with the drums. So again, you know, I've soloed the whole drum set here, and I'm going to play that for you. So first and foremost, so one of the things that I saw that they were doing on this mix, in their session, was they were using this SSL channel, which is probably one of my all-time favorite plugins. And I have a console full of them. And they were really clamping down using the gate and the expander, you know, really clamping down on the drums, so that it made them slightly. It didn't have much sustain, but to be quite honest, and in their defense, the drums on this particular song needed a bit of work, especially the snare drum. If I solo this close mic snare drum, it's going to be nasty. It's nasty. And I did the best that I could with it to get it to sound great, but sometimes you can only go so far. So what I've actually ended up doing, so there's the top mic, here's the top and the bottom. So to be quite honest, I'm really just using those microphones. They just add a little bit of body into the sounds that I have. So in their session, they had a sample on there. This is actually from their session, which is, so they use this plugin to trigger a sample. And again, it was just that Ludwig top mic. The only difference that I did is I took their sample and I flipped it into stereo. They had it in mono in their session. I flipped it into stereo so that it gave a wider imaging and raised the level of the overhead mics, just to give it some stereo imaging of that snare drum. And again, this is, you all can steal the snare drum. It's stock. It's not, it's not one of my special samples that, I don't want anybody to have this, so again, that goes into, again, the SSL channel, which gets a little bit of spank on it. But most importantly, first and foremost, for those of you familiar with my mixing style, is I create my drum triggers. So my drum trigger tracks, which I'm going to highlight and make larger for you. The drum trigger tracks, what they do and what they are, as you can see, they're totally 100% clean little blips of the actual hits of the bass drum, or the foot, I call it the foot, and the snare drum. Okay, so what I've done is I've created a trigger track that's sample accurate, and then I've checked it to make sure that I didn't miss any hits. So how I check it is I have this trigger track trigger a gate that I have in duck mode. So basically what it does is every time it sees the trigger, it ducks the audio. So basically when you're listening to verify the track, if you hear a snare drum, it's not in the trigger track. So then you just basically, I create the trigger track, I verify it, and if I've missed a couple of hits, I'll go in and check them. And normally, like on this particular song, the only ones that I missed would have been these little press rolls right here. So if I solo the whole drum set, I'm going to go back to that and just play, whoops. If I solo the whole drum set right here. So it's just a little stick drag right there. So those were missed, and you can see I just placed those in by hand. So there's two reasons why I make those. One, because if I'm working on somebody's song and I'm going to either add drum samples, or exchange drum sounds, I need to be 100% positive that the trigger tracks and what I'm triggering is perfect. Okay. Whereas in their session, he literally just duplicated the snare drum track and found a middle ground, to trigger it, which probably hit, I think I checked it and it hit about 90 to 95% of the hits. It missed a couple of them.
So he didn't do, so he actually did a really good job. So
he did a great job.
Right.
He did a great job. But again, this just does it. So any of you guys out there that have gone through and tried to, replace snare drums, and you've spent time doing it, and then all of a sudden you've realized that the sample that you're using is not the one that you want to use, and then you have to go through that whole chain of events again, because you're like, all right, so here, this works for the first verse, this setting works for the, for the chorus, it all depends on what the drummer's playing. By creating the trigger track, now you have a verified track that will trigger your snare drum or bass drum sample perfectly every time, and it gives you the opportunity to go through an arsenal of samples or try different types of sounds. So that's one reason why I do it. The second reason why I do it is it also enables me to trigger a gate to control leakage. So again, if we go to the bass drum, here's their live bass drum. Let's just solo it, so it just solos the bass drum.
First day with the new hands?
Yeah, first day with the new hands, always is. So if I turn the C1 gate off, right, and if I solo the bass drum, so you can hear the little bit of leakage that's in the background there. Not so bad on a bass drum, but when I turn the gate on, obviously it all disappears. And if you notice, it's being keyed. I mean, first of all, look, they're like, how come you're not getting any leakage? Look where your threshold is. Right, because my threshold, now, if there's a fart on my trigger track, it's going to open that gate up. Okay, so basically I have the threshold set the absolute minimum because I have a track that's triggering it that I know has every single hit perfect, no problem. This gives me the ability to control leakage, to do all types of creative effects. And I have to be honest with you, anytime I don't do, which I mean, I actually do it every time now, but anytime that I don't do my drum triggers, my bass drum and snare drum triggers, I feel like this. I feel like that I'm handcuffed, because it's not always just about adding a bass drum sample or a snare drum sample. It's about the creative option that it opens up. I can't tell you how many times I've used this trick to duck a bass, you know, or to gate the drum room. You know what I mean? So it opens up this whole new creative freedom.
So you've pretty much just answered the question of Scott Selbeck, who was asking a question
but
on
not
your
to mention the
opinion of
fact
samples.
that, not to mention the fact that it also gives me the opportunity, you know, to place in boatloads of samples. You know, so there we go. So this is one snare drum that I added to it because I wanted to. I liked that kind of fat, dead type of sound that was on there, but I wanted to hear a little bit of a tone. I wanted to hear, especially in the stops, where the song has a lot of stops. So especially in the stop, I wanted to hear in my ear, I wanted to hear a tad bit of sustain. So yes, there are samples on here. And again, I did the best that I could working with the snare drum that they gave me. I tried to see if I could get anything to happen with it, any tonally wise, and was unable to. So therefore went into the samples, but I'm still using their top and bottom snare mics. And again, I'm using them more for bottom end or low mid-range impact.
Right. So I have a question here from TZ Mix Recording Engineer. I don't think that's your real name, sir. He says, Tom, have you cleaned up the session before you played it back for us or formatted it in your template? Which is actually a very good question. It's like, do you, before you move stuff into your kitchen to do to cook something, do you rearrange it so you know where everything is?
Yeah, you're looking at it. So yes.
Okay.
Yes. So this first and foremost, if you can't navigate the session, how are you going to mix it? So I'm so used to having a session laid out in a specific manner, you know, and this is kind of the manner that I have it laid out. So again, like if, you know, this is the drum set. This is the drum set as they mixed. So as they gave it to me, this is his layout, okay, and his labeling, okay. For me, the capital letters are like somebody's yelling at me. I find it for me, it's just very difficult to look at. Secondly, the dot numbers, the dot 16, you know, I'm not a fan of that, you know. So once you get your sound and you're finished with your edit, I mean, you know, and you can see that they have other playlists in here, you know, they're kick 15, okay. But once he got to the final version, he could have just taken the dot 16 out of it. That happens to be my preference. So, but yes, I set it up the way that I want. And you can see in there stuff like he was actually, they did a minimal of stuff here. And again, what he did side, you know, parallel compression. And actually did a reasonable job at it. I don't use parallel compression, and I'm going to tell you why I don't use parallel compression. It's because I'm no damn good at it. I've just never been comfortable working that way. So again, I just mash and spank the bejesus out of the individual audio tracks until I get the sound that I'm looking for. So generally, by the time I get my sound, when I go to parallel compress, it's just way too over the top.
So I have a question here from Scott Davis, and he says, can you discuss sidechain compression? Do you use that?
Well, so my definition of sidechain compression, so sidechain compression is how I understand it, would be, let's just say, if I triggered a compressor from, say, the bass drum. Is that what he's talking about, that type of thing?
Probably.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, there's certain tracks that I've worked on, more kind of pop rocky stuff, where sometimes you have to duck the bass on the downbeat, or on the bass drum, because generally the bass drum either has a sustain and it creates a wobble. So yeah, I have done that, and obviously sometimes in the past, I would do sidechain compression, like off of a hi-hat, maybe triggering, so it does a vibrating thing with the guitar. But again, it's all dependent on the audio source. On this thing, there is no sidechain compression.
So let's talk about, because some of the three main areas, and I know that this is probably three of the main instruments in the song. The three main areas that I think that there's a difference in the mix is the drums, the guitar, and the vocals. What did you do?
There's only one other instrument.
Yeah. And I didn't mention it because we've already talked about it. So you got me. So let's talk about
and the fun. So I know that you. So oddly enough, like, let's just talk about the bass real quick that you didn't talk about. Okay, so just real quick, the bass, okay, is a bass DI, and what I thought was just amazing was when I opened up, because I was like, wow, that's a pretty good bass sound, and when I opened it up, I'm like, oh, of course it's a good bass sound. Of course it is. This particular plugin, my brother, I mean, first of all, Chris's plugins are great, but I was really knocked out. I mean, and I always am knocked out. So real quick, let's just play that bass without the plugin on there so you can hear what it sounds like. And then if we play that same part again with the plugin, I mean, it immediately puts a vibe on it. And then for me, of course, that not being enough, then I just...
You had to spank it.
Yeah. So, I mean, all I did was I duplicated the audio and then ran it through, this amps, the amp plugin. Again, just to add some distortion and fuzz, which is great. And then, because in some spots, I didn't feel fuzz was enough. You can see, like, right. Yes, I get 36 dB into the amplifier is pretty good. So here's the, but this, and it actually, what I did here creates a thing at that moment of the song. So all I did was just grind the heck out of the level going into the distortion, to get that bend, which is a Verify audio suite plugin, to get it to do that. But yeah,
it's very cool. So there's a question here while we're dealing with spanking guitars. Howie Spangler says, how do I get loud guitars and drums without burying the vocals? He's having trouble with a pop funk mix. He also mentioned horns, but I don't think there are any horns in this mix.
Yeah. So the question is, how do I get drums and guitar to sound loud and aggressive without burying the vocal?
Yes.
Make the song an instrumental.
Oh, well, there you go, Howie. But
sorry.
other than that,
it's the wise ass in me. For me, I always mix the song instrumentally first. I mean, obviously, first I listen to the vocal, listen to what's going on, then I mix the song, and the vocal is usually the last thing that I put in. So usually by that point, I've got everything kind of chiseled out the way that I want it. I don't have the magic bullet for that, other than get the band to sound as great as you can, and then just spank the shit out of the vocal to get it to fit in. I mean, again, a lot of the time you might just have to notch it a little bit to get it to fit in, but generally speaking, the vocal should be able to fit right in there, no problem. Again, watch and be aware of all the center information. You know what I mean? So sometimes it can be achieved by pulling things out of the center and making things a little bit wider, get them out of the way of the vocal.
Right. So now, one of the things that I've always learned from your mixes is also be brave and experiment and really I mean, your mixes pretty much personify. It's like, okay, what the hell's going to happen wrong? I can always press undo or come back if I need to with a lot of your stuff.
Right,
So
right. What's the worst that could happen? So again, I mean, the bass is an excellent thing. It's like, all right, well, let's just put this on and see what happens. And then I was like, well, what happens if I grind it? You know, like when it went to that one spot where the bass pitched down, I'm like, well, God, I really want to make that a thing. So I was just like, well, what happens if I just gain if I just clip gain that?
right.
So and there you have it. And once I did that, you can see a couple of the spots on the blue the blue line here of the bass distortion, again, where I've clip gained other bits that I wanted to speak. So
right.
The other thing that you may have noticed is all the edits that are in here. So first,
Coffee
when
makes you gassy.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the coffee making me burp. First, I knew in my head as I was working on this, when I worked on the bass, I knew that I was going to add that distortion in there, and the distortion was adding a lot of noise when he's not playing. So I went through and cleaned it out. Secondly, unfortunately, and it's not unusual, there were bad edits. You know what I mean? So I had to go through and clear out some of the bad edits.
When you say bad edits, can you elaborate on that? Because
Sure can. Let's see if we can give you a demonstration here. So let me play this right here. So this is the DI bass. So let me just play that and let me flip over to this other playlist. Okay. So
turn your speakers down just a bit if you don't mind. We're getting some bleed.
Yeah. So right here, you're going to hear 2 clicks. Okay. And they're just bad edits. Okay. So there's the one with the bad edit. And then here's with the fix. So, and again, they were just what they were they were just, they were probably an edit that didn't have a crossfade. And this is nothing that's unusual. It happens all the time. I understand completely. And it's part of my job, as a mixer, it's part of my job to sort those things out. So there was probably 10 or 15 of them on the track, again, not a big deal. Took all of about 5 minutes to sort out.
Because
so again, what I find is once I start to put some spank on anything, all that type of stuff becomes very apparent.
So I got some other questions for you here while we're going through and we're scrolling through the mix. Paul McWhirter, g'day Paul, has asked 5 questions. If you don't mind, Paul, I'm gonna pick a couple of them. Do you check your mixes in mono, and if so, what are you listening for?
I used to check my mixes in mono. So I can't lie to you. I don't check them in mono anymore. But back in the day, I used to. Back in the day when I used to mix to the analog, I had the Studer 2-track, and it had a little mono speaker on it, and that's what I used to listen to. When I'm listening in mono, it's just an alternate source of monitoring. And the cool thing about the Studer was it was behind me, so it was kind of like, it was always kind of like listening like everybody else listens. Nobody sits in front of speakers and, not a lot of people sit in front of speakers and critically listen.
These headphones, headphones, the ones that come with the phone, a lot of the time are how people listen.
They either use headphones or they just listen through speakers. But no, I don't really listen to mono anymore, and again, I have 3 sets of monitors in my room that I use. The CLA 10s, the Barefoots, and the IK iLouds.
I've got a pair of iLouds here as well, and I love those.
I got the MTMs, which are brilliant.
And I got the Barefoots, which I like. So
they're brilliant. So between all 3 of those, for the different monitoring, that's what I use. And I do listen on I do check on my on the Sonys.
Yeah.
These are great headphones.
They are great headphones. So the second question, which I'm going to pick from him, is Are there any advice you could give on balancing the kick and the bass guitar to enhance the low end, or was that kind of answered with the triggering?
Well, yeah. So I mean, again, the creating your bass drum trigger track will help you to, if you need to reduce some of the sustain, because sometimes it creates a wobble with the note that the bass drum is playing and the note that the bass is playing. But yeah, the trick is there's a here. Let me just show it to you. So the trick is particularly, you see this right here? That adds low frequency. God, I'm such a sarcastic bastard. Just add some bottom end. So what I try to do is I try to find where's the energy in the bass drum, around what frequency, and that's the frequency that I add. So, and this one I'm pretty subtle. I was only adding 6 dB at 50. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to give it the juice. Let's see what we did on the bass drum sample. Oh, the bass drum sample already had some good thud, so I really didn't add much. And then on the bass drum room sample, again, I'm adding a 6 dB, roughly a little bit lower than that. But don't be afraid to give it the business. The SSL EQ goes to plus 15 for a reason.
Yeah.
Because if that's not enough, you just put another one on.
So I've noticed that in all your SSLs that I've seen so far, all your SSLs have analog as off. Do you ever leave a couple of the analogs on?
Can you tell me what the analog does?
I can,
Okay.
but it's like it's the artifacts. It's like kind of like it's like the circuitry of the boards running through the actual hardware.
Okay.
That's the simplest version.
Right. So equalization wise, it doesn't change the sound of the equalization, correct?
No.
Okay. It doesn't change the sound of the compression?
Nope.
Okay. Doesn't change the way the expander works?
I'm thinking that you're asking me trick questions now.
No, look, I have to be honest. I've never discussed with you guys
That's fine.
what the analog does. I know what the analog does.
Yeah.
It adds analog noise.
Yeah.
It basically adds the noise that the console makes. So
the artifacts. But
it doesn't. It's not like, it's like analog tape.
No, it doesn't sound anything like your phone alert, which is a train, which I'd like you to mute if you can.
Right.
Please. So while you're muting your phone,
and I am muting the phone, but it's just so you know that it's my mother, so she's probably watching.
my
90-year-old mom. Hello, mom. Hi, Mom. I miss you, Mom. I miss you. I can't wait to see you, Mom. So yeah, look. This session had all the analog buttons turned on. Okay. And I thank you for the Waves guys and the guys over tech support at Waves to now when you open a Waves plugin, analog is defaulted to off. It saves me a lot of time and having to go through and turn it off because look, you want it. Sometimes you want that.
Yeah.
For me, when I'm using sometimes 30 and 40 of those plugins on a mix, you know what I mean? Again, it just adds extra noise that I don't want. It's my particular flavor. I don't want the analog noise.
That's one of the beautiful things I love about plugins is everybody. It's like an artist with paint colors. Everybody has a different choice of palette, and you can use the same colors and the same plugins and come up with something completely different just because of the way you use them.
Again, so on it's the same with this plugin here.
Love this one.
Which is, come on, who doesn't love this? This plugin is awesome.
Yeah,
it's great. And if the great thing is now in plugins, I can use like 100 of them if I wanted to. Thank God I don't need 100 consoles.
So I'm noticing you like the APIs as well.
Well, I've always been a fan of it. On this particular song, what did I use the API on? I know that I used it. I think I used it. Let me see.
It popped up somewhere really early on.
It did pop up. I think, it was on the vocal. Yeah, it was on the vocal. Right. So I when I worked at South Beach Studios, they had a rack of these. I always, for some reason, really liked this 560 graphic. I always really liked it. So on this particular song, look at that. Huh? Hello, brother. Hello, brother. This is actually their setting. Aside from, I think I added just a touch more at the top, but this is their vocal distortion on this song. And so part of being a mixer is knowing when good is good. You know what I mean? So obviously when I take this off, the vocal is clean. It doesn't have the grind. So again, Chris really did a great job with this plugin, and I use this plugin all the time. It's great to do this grindy stuff. But I wanted to hear more spit and more top end in her voice. I wanted to be just a tad bit more aggro. So literally, you can see, like, look at what I'm doing. It's like, boy, that's pretty aggressive. But remember, it's going in to the distortion. Let's just give that a quick listen and see what that's doing. So, but by adding this EQ here, see, if I take it out, it just loses some of its sparkle. And then put it back in, you get a little bit more of that sparkle. So again, this is the plugin that's doing all the work here. This is me just EQing into the distortion, okay? And then after that, again, so after that, we go into the finishing, basically the finishing part. So now you'll notice on this, I'm using the expander. So, so I'm rolling off any of that ultra top end from the distortion, because I didn't want it to be too, anything above the 12K, I didn't want to hear, which is probably not there anyway. And again, then I'm adding some of it back at around 9K. Okay. And you can see I'm adding just a boatload of bottom. Okay. But I'm adding it just a touch below where she's singing. So it just gives a little bit of energy. And then with a quick attack, I'm brick walling it. Okay. And then I'm using the expander here because, again, on this particular plugin, it just has that little bit of noise because I'm using a distortion. So again, all the expander here is being used for is just to, because again, I have 3 or 4 of them, or 3 of them in this mix. It might be 4. Again, if I start to stack them up, we'd start to get a little bit, a bit of noise that I'm not looking for. So again, I just have this so that when she's done singing, it just closes down. You know what I mean? And again, so then the final piece of the puzzle on this is I just needed to notch out a bit of there was a bit, as you can see here, of the harshness in that 26, the 2K range. So again, so this is after the compression, and this is just, I use this EQ as like a finishing EQ. This is great for notching stuff. And again, just to do a little bit of finishing. So again, after the compression, because I'm normally EQ into compression, big fan of EQing into compression. And this is just that little bit of finishing work. So hence why there's 4 plugins. This is actually just the final, just little bit of sparkle added after just all the chain of events.
Got a few questions here. Alex is one of the people asking. Hi, Alex. How much compression is Tom applying to his master bus, if any?
Let's take a look.
Also, how does he go about managing low mids on drums and bass? So let's look at the master though.
So here's the master bus. So first, let's show you what I got in here. So I'm gonna play the song. So this is the exact same setting that I use on my console. Okay, so literally it's the exact same setting I use on my console. So
can't hear you. You're gonna have to press stop.
Of course, I can't talk over the music. Of course, I can't talk over the music. This is the exact same setting that I use on the console. Literally, it's the same exact setting. It's the great setting. The auto release on this plugin is awesome. So I'm always looking to bang between 4 and 8s. 4 and 8 dB of compression at 4 to 1. Okay, so that's the starting point. And then this little gem right here, just to grab the transient peaks. Okay, so this I'm just using just to catch any overs, pretty much. And then the rest of the chain events here are for our technical work here. So this is obviously, enables me to A/B between the mix and the rough mix. Okay. And then the last one on here is just so I can send, this is how you're all hearing it. Okay. By that particular plugin.
That plugin's coming to me, and then from me out to you guys. So
that's right.
That's so on his master.
But as far as with the low mid in on the drum set, again, don't be afraid to pull it out. It all depends. So on this particular song, this is an interesting one because I did something on this. It was very kind of splashy, cymbally, sloshy cymbalies on this particular track. And when I started to dive into it, no matter what I did, it just made it worse. So I decided to do this. Let me see what I have in front. Okay, right. In the front here, remember what I told you about this equalizer? This is a great little notcher. So again, I'm using it. So before I go into the studio rack, I use this to pull out the harshness, which is that 2.8K harshness. There was a real buildup of that. So I pulled that out. That allows the energy of the cymbals to be raised up in the frequency spectrum as to not compete with bite from guitars. Okay, so that's what that notch is. So from that, I just started punting, okay, because I was like, well, let me see what I can do that will make this work. So because it was so sloshy, I just wanted to come across with something that would just have some cymbals in there, because obviously I wasn't going to achieve nirvana. So I had to try something different. So this plugin is so unbelievable. If you can think it, you can do it with this plugin. It allows you, it's crazy what you can do with it. So I actually went through and I found somebody's preset called Hi-Hat Saturator. And I thought, well, that's kind of what I'm looking for here. I was looking for something to try and reduce all that hi-hat. And that's exactly what I did. And then I was able with these macros to adjust in exactly what I wanted to do. So here are the cymbal tracks. And I know when I play that when I play them in solo, it doesn't sound like much, but let me tell you what this particular plugin does is really help calms them down. And again, the saturation, it keeps them at a place where I want them to be without them becoming overwhelming. So yeah, the studio rack it's powerful.
Before we go any further, for those of you who don't know about Studio Rack is free. I said free. Any of you who have Waves plugins, please go into your Waves account, and there is a link in your account user part of the page that will let you register a version of Studio Rack for free, and then you can download and install it from Wave Central. This loads chains of up to, well, I used to be able to say a chain of up to 8 plugins, but there's so much more this does. This does parallel splits. It does multi-band splits. It's really deep. But we've also, Tom, if you could just hit the load button so I can show people how many presets comes with this from how many artists. So we have a ton of artists who have created presets for this, plus we've created our own. Please, this is a great tool for any of you out there.
It's exactly what I did. So, because this is one of those plugins that on first use, you're going to feel intimidated. Okay. So the more you use it, the more you get comfortable with it, the more you figure it out, the better you're going to get at it. And you'll be able to take what's in your mind, in your imagination, and make it happen. You'll be able to put a macro in there and be able to do it. It's pretty deep. So again, it's what you just said is exactly what I did. I loaded the plugin and I just went through some presets. I saw one that said Hi-Hat Saturator, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve. And then I made it my own by using the macros that this person had set up for me. So
And
It's pretty deep.
if you can just click on the macros for me, Tom, on the far left hand side, just click on the. So each of those macros, if you hit just edit, you don't have to, but you can hit edit on any of those macros, and each macro can control multiple things, and then you can
Right. So
reverse
this
the
is telling
range,
you,
etc. So
it's telling you what each macro is doing. So an example, macro 2 is running the Puig Tech EQP1A, and it's doing a high boost. Okay. And then you can tell it what range you want it to go. Okay. And then number 3 is running the CLA3A, peak reduction, basically the amount of compression, right? So if I close that window, you can here's compress, here's drive, here's high frequency boost. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
it really is the tip of the
It's
iceberg.
just the tip of the iceberg.
This is an amazing plugin, and for something that's free,
Yeah.
you need
And
to mess with
the
it.
great thing I think is, as time goes on and more people use it, people are going to come up with some ludicrously insane presets, that will inspire more people. So this already will inspire me to make my own preset, so that's the great thing, is like, and then we start sharing them,
Well,
but it's some
it's
powerful.
interesting, Tom. It's like there's a couple of questions saying, when is TLA coming out with some plugins or presets? Time is ticking, my friend. All right, so we've talked about the bass, the drums, the guitars, and the vocals, which is the song. We've talked a bit about your compression. I have got a few more questions here. One person wants to know if you could go into a bit more detail. Bruce wants to know if you could maybe talk a bit more about how you create your trigger tracks that you were talking about up at the top.
So the creating the trigger tracks, I use a plugin to help create the trigger tracks and verify it. But basically the same thing can be done. You can do it. You can do it with the gate. I don't feel that it's fair that I speak about another manufacturer's plugin while I'm on a Waves thing. So to create my trigger tracks, I have to use somebody else's plugin. So therefore, if you want to learn more about it, there are videos up there of me explaining in detail how to make it.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
But to be quite honest, it can be done with a gate plugin. Okay.
What Tony says, do you trim all of the clicks on your end, or did the session come like that? How does doing this help your workflow?
I trimmed the session came as start to finish audio file, no cut of the regions. So obviously on the drum set, the reason I cut this right here is because the drums aren't playing there and there's noise. There literally is noise. And again, the same with the bass, not to mention fixing some clicks and pops, and the same with the guitar. So at the very beginning of the song, let's play the very beginning of the song. Okay, so I'm going to do it one more time because I had my speakers on. So I wanted that first guitar to come in, and then I wanted to go to almost abnormal silence. You know what I mean? I wanted it to be drastic. I wanted it to be guitar and then silence. I didn't want to hear amp noise. I didn't want to hear finger noise. I didn't want to hear anything. So that's why I chopped those. Okay. And then as I started going through the song, I chopped out the ones that I felt where I wanted the dead space to be. Now, the main guitar came in as a 2 microphone, 2 amp recording, which I call main guitar 1A, main guitar 1B. I have them panned slightly. Okay. And what I'm doing to them, if I solo them, so I actually, even though they're panned slightly, I'm using this Abbey Road TG mastering chain to add just a little notch of mid-range, but more so I'm using the spreader feature. So as you can see in the very intro of the song here's the intro, you'll see it it's actually at minus. So I'm creating less of a stereo spread. So remember, the guitars aren't stereo. Okay, they're two amplifiers playing the same thing. It's the same performance. If you pan them hard left and right, you just get a ton of phasing issues. Okay, so in the front, I wanted it to be a little bit more closer to center. So here we go, and you'll watch the spreader here. Right, and so did you hear that? You heard the guitar all of a sudden become visibly wider. Okay, so but in the spot when it was soloed, in the two spots in the song where it's soloed, I didn't want that kind of artificial width. Once the drums and the bass came in, I needed the guitars to come out from the center to make space for the bass and for the drums. Okay, and that was my fix all for that. So again, going back to how it came to me, it came in as straight audio passes all the way through, audio channels or regions. Okay, and then rather than do automation or anything like that, I created a chorus section. I just dragged the regions down to another set of channels and created another set of channels. Okay, so, and it would be these channels here. So, and let's enlarge them a little bit. I'll make them so they're slightly bigger view. So for those of you that are keeping track, you're going to be going, well, hang on a second, Tom. You said there was only one main track of guitars. There was. There's not anymore. The cool thing is, music is repetition. Okay, and this was a performance, so it's not like he played one chorus and it was pasted everywhere. Every chorus was played separately, so all I did was flew the second chorus to the first chorus, third chorus to the second chorus, first chorus so I created a double track. So when the chorus comes in, now I have glorious stereo, big wide stereo. And yeah, and that's why I did it, because I felt, again, when I listened to this mix, I really liked the song, and I just wanted that chorus to just scream. I really wanted it to I just wanted it to be big. So I'm going to just shut the vocal off for a second. Okay. And I'm going to play it just from this B section, and it will play into the chorus, and you can hear the kind of expansion. So now, having said that, there also is a Les Paul that comes in and plays in the B sections and the choruses. I actually think I flew it into the first B section. It wasn't there originally. And again, that comes in on the left side. But here's just an instrumental where you can hear the chorus where the gears change. So again, it allowed me to make that chorus expand, in the stereo field, to really make it expand. So again, music is repetition. It's not that difficult to do it. So now, I don't know whether the band is going to dig that or not, but I would assume that they would. And again, I did the same thing on the Les Paul track. Again, I kept it panned left. I liked it on the left, and actually on the double track, I have the double track that I created on the left at a slightly lower volume. Okay, but I still wanted that to have that double track. And then again, there was a couple of spots in the Les Paul where he does stuff like this, that I was just like, oh, well, let me just double those two, again, just to make a bigger deal out of them.
No, sounds amazing. So I've got a question here from Bjorn Eriksson. He goes, hello, Tom. Are you doing any loudness consideration on mixdown, or is it left to the mastering stage?
I always leave room for mastering. I try, obviously I have to get it as loud as I possibly can. So normally that's the limitation of what the level of my console is willing to spit out. And the good news is my console can spit out very loud audio. But no, in this particular situation, I spent the minute to get it as loud as their rough mix. So it was important to me that they were the same level. But no, normally I'm not a mastering engineer. I don't pretend to be one. I leave that to the pros, because the mastering engineer just makes my mix sound better.
That's what they do. So Trent Rhodes asks, can you talk a bit about how you achieve clarity in the mix besides subtractive EQ and stereo placement?
I'm not a big subtraction EQ guy. I subtract EQ when it's trouble spots. I've always been more of a add EQ guy. So like when I always sit down at the console, whenever I do, I never listen and think, oh God, we need to pull some of that out. I always go, oh no, it needs more top end. So that's kind of how I've always approached it. And again, what you've seen in the subtraction area of my mixes, on this particular mix, are usually just trouble spots. Again, usually it's that harshness in the cymbals, or the harshness in the vocal. But again, I achieve clarity literally by just, compression and a shit ton of top end. If you think it's bright enough, it's not.
So when it comes to a mix like this, and I've asked your brother this question many times over the years when we've done masterclasses, so I'm going to ask you because I haven't done as many with you, my friend. How long do you usually spend on a song before you walk away and give your ears a bit of a rest?
I walk away when I'm tired.
Okay.
I mean, I walk away when I'm tired. I mean, one thing that I found is it's about getting in that rhythm, getting in the rhythm. So it's about finding the plugins, finding the workflow that helps you to work in a creative manner. I try to work, hence the layout of my sessions. It's done very specifically so that I'm setting myself up to be creative. I want to be creative, and I don't want to be a slave to technology. So I'm always trying to do whatever I can to keep my mind creative and not have to worry about all these other things. So, and again, generally, if I get stuck on something, then that's usually the tip that I should take a break. Like if I'm spending more than 20 minutes on something, that's not like, if I'm just stuck on can't get a sound, then I need to walk away. The overheads are a great example. I spent probably 15 or 20 minutes screwing around with them with how I normally would. And then I said, okay, I need to rethink this. And then so the creative juices were already there. And I started walking down roads I normally wouldn't have walked down and found something that worked. And that's the great thing about mixing, is that never ends and it never changes. Like all of a sudden you'll get a little something in your brain, and you'll start doing something that you normally wouldn't do. And that's a lot of times where you can get magic to happen or come up with something really unique.
It's not about the gear, it's about the ear.
It's not exactly.
Okay, so you've done this mix, and there are, one of the things I love about your mixes is you have a very, very signature sound. If you think back over your vast catalog, are there any songs or memories or albums that you've mixed that you look back on and think that was a defining moment in my mixing career?
Yeah, sure.
Can you share?
Sure. Well, so I think that the album Live Throwing Copper,
Right.
um, that particular album really resonated amongst musicians, and people in the musical community. For some reason, everybody really liked the way that record sounded.
Sounds amazing.
I mean, I I mix the record and then I walk away from it. The only time I would hear it again is if it was on the radio. But I listened to that record and I knew what I started with. So when I listened to that, I was like, wow, that was a pretty good state of mind I was in, because that was a pretty bad recording. That was a very bad recording.
In
But
what
somehow
way?
it's just a bad recording. It was an analog recording that wasn't recorded well.
Mm.
It wasn't recorded well. But somehow I was able to pull it off. I mean, one of the great things was the room that I was mixing in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It had a great live room. So, I mean, a lot of the ambience, and especially the drum ambience, was me sending the drums out to the studio and remiking, creating a new room. Chad Grace he's an amazing drummer. He's difficult to record. I've recorded him on numerous occasions, and he's a difficult drummer to record. He's very heavy with the hi-hat and heavy with the cymbals. So that was one of the issues with that record, a lot of the hi-hats and cymbals. But that album, at that particular point in my career, I was just kind of turning the page from mixing adult contemporary stuff, moving into, the kind of rock and the emo stuff.
Right.
So that album obviously was huge. I mean, literally the album I did before that was Crash Test Dummies, God Shuffled His Feet.
Which is another, really, to me, would be a defining moment in history.
So I mean, those
that was an amazing
two,
album too.
Yeah, I mean, those two records in particular were defining it. But we can go all the way back. I mean, obviously, Steve Winwood back in the High Life album, very early in my career, was pretty much where I got to learn a lot about recording and mixing on Winwood's dime.
Yeah.
First album I ever recorded live drums on, back in the High Life album.
Didn't you work with Jimmy Braylauer on that one as well?
I did.
Wasn't, yeah,
Jimmy the Bee.
Yeah, Jimmy the Bee.
Jimmy the Bee's awesome. Love that guy.
He's a good human being.
He's awesome.
You're both good human beings. So
he's awesome.
How did you come about? I mean, how did that job come around for that project?
Right. So Chris and I were staff engineers at Unique Recording. Well, first Chris was staff engineer at Unique Recording. In 1984, I stopped doing live sound, and Chris recommended I come and work at the studio. So I came up and worked at the studio. I assisted Chris. I was his assistant for a couple of weeks, before he started throwing me my own sessions. This project came along. They hired Chris for it. But Chris was starting to focus his energies on mixing and didn't want to be stuck recording an album for months, which this was going to be. It was going to be a good 6 or 7 months. I spent 8 months on it, recording that album. But Chris recommended me to do the recording, and then he would mix it. Oops. Sorry, brother.
You're not.
Well, I won a Grammy. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I won a Best Engineered Recording Grammy. Chris was very, very proud. Let me tell you what, he was probably prouder than me. I mean, he's still proud to this day. And then 2 years later, I won another Best Engineered Recording Grammy. Just think about, if you're Chris, how that felt. He brought me in. So that was difficult. And it wasn't until 20 years later where I was able to return the favor.
Yeah.
When I was hired to mix an album in Miami Beach, months before the mixing started, they scheduled me in, because I was booked, months and months in advance. So 2 weeks before the album, before they were coming down to mix the album, I got a call from the producer, and he said, "Plans have changed. We can't come to Miami Beach. Would you consider coming to Los Angeles?" And I said, "Well, do you want my best mixes?" And he said, "Of course we want your best mixes." And I said, "You need to come to Miami Beach." They said, "We can't." And I said, "I know a guy." And I recommended Chris.
Yeah.
And you know what that album was?
Green Day?
American Idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chris killed it. Won his first Grammy.
Yeah, he did.
Killed it. I listened to that record and go, oh, thank God I didn't mix it. It was so meant for Chris. It was so perfect.
So when we're talking,
so perfect.
So when we're talking, because obviously there's a ton of people who are watching this, my friend, who want to be at the level that you have achieved, and obviously it's a ton of hard work. If you had one piece of advice that you could give people who are on their way from the spare room in the bedroom recording studio to get to what you've achieved, what do you think it would be?
Mixing, you got to live and die by your decisions. If you're indecisive, this is not a job for you. You know what I mean? You have to be decisive. So trust your gut. Trust your gut. I do. I live and die by my decisions. I did this mix. I mean, I don't know if we're going to send a copy to the band, but I live and die by my decisions, as I do with every mix. You have to be decisive. That is half the battle right there, making the decisions and not second guessing. Your gut feeling 99.9% of the time is the way it should be. Simple as that. And to everybody out there, the more you mix, the better you get. Okay, so mix your meal, mix your beans eat your beans at every meal. No, so mix every day, mix tracks, mix for your friends, hang around musicians, hang around bands, beg, borrow, steal, learn the craft, mix, be creative. It's not the gear, it's your ear. Okay, remember, we're making music, we're trying to create vibe.